We can give ourselves far more than anyone can take away. We're building this great country. I just met with the Premier, building BC, building Canada, building in a Canadian way, building sustainably, building together, building positively, and that's what we're going to do. And yes, we'll come to something with the Americans, something constructive with the Americans.
On August 1st, President Trump raised tariffs on Canadian goods not covered by USMCA from 25% to 35%. It was a clear escalation intended to pressure Ottawa into a trade deal. But Canada didn't hit back with equal firepower. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney turned attention inward, toward building economic strength from within.
And we can do so through our leadership in clean energy, in critical minerals, and in the intelligence infrastructure of the AI revolution.
Rather than matching Trump's aggression, Carney emphasized long-term strategy. He doubled down on Canada's potential as a clean energy and critical minerals leader. While others debated retaliation, Carney introduced a fast-track framework to accelerate mining approvals, signaling that Canada's response would be structural, not reactive.
Canada is home to some of the largest reserves of critical minerals in the world. We have lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and rare earth elements. They're all widely available here.
That response may prove more powerful than any tariff. Canada holds large reserves of lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, and rare earth elements, minerals essential to electric vehicles, AI systems, defense, and energy storage. As of 2023, Canada's mineral production exceeded 70 billion Canadian dollars, but most critical minerals are still underground or underdeveloped. Only half of current mines are Canadian-owned, and less than a third of refineries operate domestically. This imbalance is what Carney's government is now racing to correct. With the global demand for rare earth magnets expected to more than double by 2035, Canada is positioning itself not just as a raw exporter, but as a complete supply chain partner. This is more than a mineral boom. It's a bargaining chip, especially as the U.S. struggles to secure alternative sources.
I'd like to buy minerals on Russian land too, if we can. The rare earth, they have very good rare earth also. They both do, I would say that.
Now, escalating trade tensions between the two countries have forced the U.S. to seek to develop a domestic supply chain after China enacted stringent export controls of rare earths back in April.
While Trump pressures Canada, his administration is simultaneously casting a wider net. In recent weeks, Trump floated the idea of buying rare earth minerals from Russia, even suggesting the possibility of using deals to justify sanctions relief. At the same time, tensions with China remain unresolved. After Trump's second-term tariffs hit 145% in April, China retaliated by restricting exports of heavy rare earths, materials used in U.S. defense and technology. Tesla and Ford saw disruptions. Suzuki halted production. In that context, Canada stands out. It's a stable, democratic neighbor with abundant resources, but now also burdened by U.S. tariffs. The contradiction is hard to ignore. Washington needs what Ottawa has, but seems unwilling to admit it. Carney's strategy is clear. Use the pressure not to cave, but to transform. Bill C-5, known as the One Canadian Economy Act, aims to reduce regulatory delays that often stall mining projects for over a decade. It also sets the groundwork for refining capabilities within Canada, a step that would reduce dependence on Chinese processing. Company like Electrovia is already showing what's possible. Electrovia exports high-performance lithium-ion batteries to Japan and the US. This early example could become the template for a reindustrialized, mineral-powered Canadian economy. Trump's tariff-first strategy seeks quick political wins. But the risks of alienating Canada are growing. If the U.S. loses access to Canadian minerals, it risks bottlenecks in EV production, AI hardware, and even military supply chains. The Department of Defense has already invested over $500 million in domestic rare earth supply initiatives, including a $400 million package for MP materials, just to reduce dependence on China. But these efforts will take years. In the meantime, Canada remains America's most viable near-term partner. And Carney knows it. By refusing to retaliate impulsively, he's repositioning Canada as a mineral power, not just for domestic growth, but for strategic leverage. Because in the long run, you don't win a trade war by shouting louder. You win it by becoming indispensable.
number of days. Dominic LeBlanc says he remains confident that negotiations to reach that trade deal will continue. But this comes after the U.S. imposed a 35% tariff on Canadian goods not covered under CUSMA.
Dominic LeBlanc also says the Prime Minister and President will likely speak over the next number of days.
On August 1st, President Trump imposed a 35% tariff on Canadian goods not covered under the USMCA. It was a sharp escalation from the previous 25%, and it came without warning. Officially, Trump pointed to fentanyl trafficking as justification. But inside Washington, the rationale wasn't so clear-cut.
The only reason
Canada retaliated. The only other country in the world who retaliated on tariffs was the Chinese.
According to U.S. trade officials, the real trigger was retaliation. Canada's decision to maintain counter tariffs first introduced under the Trudeau government, covering $60 billion worth of U.S. goods. Today, those tariffs are still in place, especially on steel and aluminum. Canada may not have escalated, but it didn't back down either. Only two countries have dared to push back on Trump's tariff regime: China and Canada. And while others like the EU, Japan, and Mexico avoided confrontation, Canada stood firm and became the first to be hit with the full 35% rate ahead of all others. Yet even under pressure, Canada did not strike back. Prime Minister Mark Carney had warned of possible countermeasures if no deal was reached by August 1st. But that day came and went without any new tariffs from Ottawa. Instead, Carney took a different path. He maintained existing measures, defended the need to protect Canada's domestic steel and aluminum industries, and avoided feeding the escalation. His message was clear. Canada would respond, but not react. His tone emphasized stability and principle, building the Canadian way through sustainability, collaboration, and restraint. This was not weakness. It was a calculated choice to keep the door open for negotiation while holding firm on national priorities.
So these tariff rates are pretty much set.
For the deals that aren't ready yet, they're going to get the reciprocal rates soon, and then we would expect that there might continue to be negotiations with those countries.
On the American side, signals were inconsistent. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer told CBS that the tariff rates were effectively set and unlikely to change. Meanwhile, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett told NBC that negotiations were still possible and ongoing with countries like Canada. Adding to the confusion, the Trump administration has treated every tariff announcement as if it were part of a deal, even when imposed unilaterally. Whether this is a deliberate strategy or not, one thing is clear. The only person who will ultimately decide the outcome is Trump himself. Still, he hasn't shut the door. Trump confirmed that Carney had tried to call him. While the two leaders haven't spoken yet, both sides now acknowledge the possibility of a direct conversation in the coming days. Back in Ottawa, optimism is rising, cautiously. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc says negotiations are continuing and that Canada is ready to stay in Washington as long as needed. Canadian officials now have a better read on U.S. concerns after meetings with Ambassador Greer and Commerce Secretary Lutnick. Importantly, Canada doesn't appear rushed. According to a recent report from the Royal Bank of Canada, the 35% tariff hike is not expected to significantly alter the country's economic outlook. That gives Ottawa room to maneuver, without needing to concede too soon or too much.
Other countries, the EU, Mexico, Japan, did not choose to retaliate, did not choose to stand up to this president. And I think the world made a mistake a few months ago by making that choice. So right now, Donald Trump is in a position where he can pick on Canada, make an example of us, and send a message to every other country.
Trump's approach is forceful. He sets deadlines, announces tariffs unilaterally, and defines terms as he goes. But the response from Canada hasn't been emotional or reactive. It's been patient, deliberate, and grounded. If a deal is reached in the coming days, it will be because Canada chose to stay in the room, not because it caved. Trump may own the microphone, but Ottawa still holds leverage. And in a trade war where unpredictability is often the loudest voice, quiet resolve might just be the most powerful one.
Scott Moe says that there needs to be increased cooperation with China. A news release that you guys had issued yesterday said that there needs to be a better working relationship on trade with China. That's specifically what the premiers were calling on the Prime Minister to do. So help me reconcile those two things. Is China the enemy, or do we work with China?
Premier Doug Ford didn't hold back. In the middle of one of the most uncertain trade climates in North American history, Ontario's Premier stood before reporters and said the quiet part out loud: if Trump's tariffs continue, Canada may look east to China. This wasn't just a warning, it was a signal, a shift. One of Canada's most powerful provincial leaders openly floated the idea of deepening trade with Beijing, not Washington. And for the US, that could mean more than just a lost customer. It could mean a long-term strategic blow. So what happens if Canada actually pivots to China? Let's break it down. Since returning to the White House, President Trump has made tariffs the centerpiece of his trade agenda once again. His administration argues this is about fairness, making sure America isn't taken advantage of. But for Canada, these policies haven't brought clarity. They've brought volatility. Steel, aluminum, autos, and even softwood lumber have been hit. And now, a sweeping 35% tariff looms over all non-compliant Canadian goods starting August 1st. For business leaders across North America, this isn't a negotiation tactic. It's a threat that keeps shifting, and it's reshaping the foundation of what used to be the world's most stable trade partnership.
You know what Churchill said, our enemy of our enemy is our friend, and as long as China plays fair and doesn't undercut our markets, be it the auto sector or any sector, I have no problem dealing with them.
In response, Canada hasn't shouted, it's acted. Ottawa has quietly escalated its own tariffs on American steel and aluminum, matching the US increases. But more importantly, Canada is shifting focus. While there's still strong trade with the US, provincial leaders are building escape routes, pipelines, new export lanes, and diversified partnerships. That includes China. Ontario alone conducts over $43 billion in two-way trade with China, according to provincial figures. Imports dominate that number, but Ford is clear. If the US continues to act unpredictably, Canada will work with whoever plays fair, and that includes China. Even as Ford emphasizes protecting Canada's auto sector from Chinese EVs, his message is unmistakable. Canada is no longer beholden to the United States. We've already seen the signs. Canadian brewers are sourcing aluminum cans from China, not the US, due to skyrocketing prices from Trump's tariffs. RBC reports that as of June 2025, nearly 90% of Canadian exports entering the US are now fully USMCA compliant. A defensive move, proving Canadian businesses are adjusting supply chains to navigate around American uncertainty.
We buy about $349 billion of products. So Japan and the rest of the countries around the world have quite a bit to catch up to what we purchase off the US.
If Canada's pivot becomes permanent, the US will feel it in ways that go far beyond headlines. In 2024, Canada purchased $349 billion worth of American goods, more than Japan, Germany, and the UK combined. Losing even a portion of that trade to China would hit US manufacturers hard. Sectors like autos, machinery, agriculture, and energy rely on stable cross-border flows. If Canadian buyers shift orders to Chinese suppliers, the pain will be domestic, felt in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And it's not just about goods. Strategically, China has long sought to expand its influence in the Western Hemisphere. A deeper trade relationship with Canada would give Beijing more leverage in North America, something Washington has tried to avoid for decades. In trying to punish Canada, Trump may be pushing it into China's arms. Trump promised to win better trade deals. But tariffs have delivered something else: hesitation, retaliation, and uncertainty. Instead of pulling Canada closer, the White House is driving a wedge. A country that once stood as America's closest economic ally is now exploring other options, because it feels like it has to. Trump's tariffs were designed to protect American workers. But if those policies fracture trade relationships and push partners toward rival powers, then the damage may run far deeper than economic losses. In this new trade world, isolation isn't strength, it's a liability. And for the US, The question isn't whether tariffs backfire. It's how long we're willing to pretend they didn't.